In the previous video we saw how to import a tab-separated text file, assuming that the file was all in the correct format and everything matched and there were no problems with it. This time we'll look at a similar operation, but with a few more things that go wrong, and look at how best to deal with that. So our file is ready to import. We can go back to File, Import Data from Tab Text Files, specify the file that we want to deal with, and we're going to test the file. And a rather worrying warning comes up that our file has fatal errors. The header row is not to specification. What that means is that probably something has gone wrong with the column headings. Either they're not in the right order or they don't have the right names for each column. So we can't get any further at this stage. We're stuck. All we can do is OK that. So we need to fix that problem. So we go back into our spreadsheet. You may find that the file you were working on is still showing in the recent documents list, in which case that's the quickest way to find it again. And if I have a look through here, I can see that the Vice County column has ended up in front of the grid reference column, and it should be the other way around, and that is probably what was causing the complaint when we tried to import it. So I'll cut that column and insert it in the right place. Now at this point it's important to remember to save the spreadsheet and then do the save as to resave it as the tab separated text file. And it will say, do you want to replace the previous one? And yes, we do. Then the usual Excel warnings about saving as text file. So say yes to those. Close it down again. You don't need to save at this point. And we can go back into MapMate and carry on from where we were. It's still showing the file name that we're trying to import, so we can try testing the file again. Now we haven't got fatal errors this time, but it's come up with a different error message and telling us to click on the View Errors button to see what the problem is. So we can OK that and look at the View Errors. And at this stage it's picked out a couple of problems. We have some site names that are too long. When you do the data import, there's a limit of 64 characters for a site name. This is actually a smaller limit than if you enter a site name into MapMate Direct, which is a bit annoying, but that's the way it works at the moment. When you're doing text file imports, you have that limit. We also have a record that has an invalid grid reference. The row numbers here should line up with the rows in the spreadsheet that you were trying to import. So one way of dealing with this is to select that table and copy it, and then you can put it into a spreadsheet to keep track of the ones you need to change. So we'll go back into our spreadsheet again, and on sheet 2 I'm just going to paste those errors that I need to check, and the first one I need to look at is row 124. Now, in fact, it will be row 125 that we need to find, because MapMate doesn't count the first row that has the headings in. So as far as MapMate is concerned, that's row number 1. So we scroll down to find row 125, and if we have a look at the grid reference for that one, we can see that it's ended up with 5 figures instead of 6, and that's what's caused it to fail the import. So it's good that MapMate carries out these checks. It does help make sure that your data is in good order. So we'll add the 6-digit back into that grid reference, and then there are a number of site names that we will need to adjust. So looking at row 139, which will be row 140 in the actual spreadsheet, and I will just, for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to remove the last bit of that site name. And similarly I will make adjustments to the other sites. Once you've made all these corrections, it's the same pattern again. Save the spreadsheet itself, then save as, and replace the tab file. We can now go back to MapMate. We can get rid of that list of errors, and at this point we can test the file again. And this time there shouldn't be any errors because we corrected them, and in fact if we use the View Errors button, it's telling us that there are no errors. We can now proceed to read the file. The file's been captured OK, which means we can use the Browse button and have a look at it that way. We now move on to the series of checks here, and the first one is going to check our list of species. And it's found a number here that don't match the current MapMate species dictionary. Some of these are of orchids that have, I think, changed their names quite recently in the MapMate dictionary, so those would need updating. A couple of other things, the sort of thing that sometimes happens. We've got a thistle here where the genus and species have got confused. And this sort of thing, at first glance, looks absolutely fine, Rubus fruticosus ag, but in fact there's a full stop missing after the ag, and it only takes one little difference like that for MapMate to reject that record as not matching its species dictionary. So there's a series of things there that the solution once again would be to go back into the spreadsheet, do the editing, save it as a text file and re-import. Likewise, you can check all the other details. As we saw in the previous video, a lot of the time the recorder names will be ones that you'll want to create as new names, and that's absolutely fine. But in this case I can see that somewhere along the way my name's got mistyped. I've got the wrong middle initial there, so that's one that I would go back and change in the spreadsheet and re-import. Similarly, there's one method trying to be imported here that would be new to the list, but that looks like a legitimate method, so that's no problem. You would expect there to be new site names coming in with the import, but once again it gives a chance just to double check and see whether there's any inconsistency. The final three, as we saw before, are a bit more critical because you do have to match what's in MapMate. You can't bring in new terms in any of these three categories. So it's telling us that the sex terms are fine, the stage terms are fine, and the status terms are fine, so there's no problems there. So we did find a few issues with the species names and recorder names, so once again the way to deal with that would be to go back to the file in its spreadsheet format, correct them there, save the spreadsheet, save it as a text file, and then go back through this process again of retesting and re-importing the file and just doing the checks to make certain that there are no remaining errors. You can then proceed to import the data as we saw in the previous video.